Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another installment in our character review series for Marvel's Contest of Champions. Today we will be looking at a very cool character because, well, Magneto's been around for a while and he's one of the most widely beloved X-Men characters. But not only is he really cool, it's also awesome because he's recently had a complete character overhaul. And that's what we're here to talk about today, because there is a lot to unpack with this character. So if you are excited to learn a little bit more about Magneto and how he works after he's been revamped, make sure that you leave a like on today's video, and don't forget to subscribe for that daily variety content. So first off, we'll talk about the basic abilities that are possessed by Magneto. And the first thing that we need to keep in mind is that any opponent that has the hashtag metal attribute, which is most of the tech characters, because they either are metal or have lots of metal incorporated into their kits. There are other members of the cast that also fall into this archetype. But any character that has that metal attribute suffers an indefinite magnetized passive debuff, which will provide a couple of reductions to their capacities. First off, it takes a full second after the fight starts in order for that debuff to activate on the opponent, but once it is active, it will stay active for the entirety of the fight. It reduces the opponent's ability accuracy by 70%, as well as applies a 105% regeneration negation, which is another thing that's really cool to see because it really helps with some of those trickier opponents such as Iron Man and Ultron. Additionally, there are certain magnet bonuses that are applied as an additional bonus to Magneto as he faces off against those opponents. And that's kind of what we'll intermittently be speaking about over the rest of today's review. So the first item that we'll go through is the Mutation, which is an ability that is always active for Magneto. And this allows Magneto to deal energy damage instead of physical damage, and he gains an additional 10% base special attack damage beyond that of what his base stats apply to him. Also, any incoming bleed and shock debuffs that would be applied to Magneto operate at a minus 90% potency, so a lot of power in that. When the opponents are magnetized, the additional benefits that Magneto gains is he has an additional 50% chance to have a perfect block. He gains an additional attack rating, and his attacks cannot be auto-blocked or missed. And that is really helpful when facing off against characters such as Ghost, because she has no way of negating the attacks that come in from him, and that can be kind of tricky, because not only can she not phase as efficiently, but even when she does phase, Magneto can still hit her, which is very, very powerful. If the opponent has a class advantage, so anyone in the tech category, and they are magnetized, so most characters within the tech category, Magneto will ignore his class disadvantage, and that will remove his attack penalty and cause his opponent to lose their attack bonus. So that's really beneficial and applies to most of the tech opponent lineups that he would have. When scoring a knockdown on the opponent, Magneto has a 100% chance to gain an indefinite prowess buff, and that prowess buff can be removed using normal means, which is removed after Magneto's next special attack, and it grants him a 20% special attack damage increase. So you can get up to a 100% special attack damage increase because the maximum stack for the prowess buffs is 5. And when the opponent is magnetized, there is no limit to the amount of prowess stacks that Magneto can get. So that becomes incredibly powerful, especially in matchups such as the one against Winter Soldier, because he already has a class disadvantage and he becomes magnetized, so Magneto can just kind of spam his heavy attacks and build up those prowess buffs as high as he would like to take them, which can make for some very, very ludicrously heavy hits. When Magneto is charging a heavy attack, he activates a force field which grants him an unstoppable buff during the attack. If the opponent is struck by the heavy attack, this effect goes on cooldown for 14 seconds, and if the opponent is magnetized, then that cooldown is shortened to 10 seconds as opposed to 14. If the attack is held for 0.7 seconds, there is a 100% chance per prowess buff that Magneto has active to gain an additional prowess buff, which lasts 10 seconds and grants an additional 5% attack damage, which you can get up to a maximum of 30 stacks on that. And that can be fairly beneficial because it requires you to hold that attack for a decent amount longer, but you can really amp up the amount of damage that you're able to do after the passive prowess buffs that you're already capable of holding on to by scoring opponent knockdowns. When an opponent is magnetized, if the opponent has a personal bleed debuff, then they take additional shrapnel damage as a direct physical damage when those bleed effects end. And if the opponent is immune to bleed debuffs, it instead inflicts an armor break, which reduces the armor for a 12-second duration by a decent amount, but there is no additional damage that takes place when the debuff ends. Now, in the realm of special attacks that Magneto has, he didn't see any rework to the animations themselves, but there are some benefits based off of whether or not the opponent is magnetized or not. The Special 1 attack has a 100% chance to inflict a bleed, which lasts for 6 seconds, and if the opponent has an armor break debuff active on them, then it will inflict an additional bleed, and if the opponent is magnetized, you will then get a third bleed that activates upon landing the Special 1. When landing the Special 2, there is a 100% chance to inflict an armor break, which is significantly stronger than the other armor breaks that he can get by using the... which is significantly stronger than the armor break that he would get if the opponent is bleed immune. And this lasts for 10 seconds. This armor break cannot stack, but is reapplied each time Magneto gains a prowess effect, which is very powerful, especially when you can guarantee getting that by scoring a heavy attack on your opponent. And that's fairly easy to do by getting a standard parry and then attacking into your opponents, whether you're using the invulnerability of the charging heavy attack, or if you're just getting it off of a parry into a heavy attack application on your opponent. And if the opponent is magnetized, then the debuff triggers when the special attack is launched, as opposed to if the attack lands. Finally, the Special 3 attack, it has a couple of additional benefits based off of whether or not Magneto is facing off against a hero character. If he is, there is a 100% chance to gain a 30-second Fury buff, which doesn't increase his attack by a whole lot, but it's enough and for a very significant amount of time. Each prowess buff on Magneto has a 70% chance to inflict one bleed debuff on the opponent, which lasts for 8 seconds. And if the opponent is magnetized, there is a 100% chance for Magneto to gain a 30-second Fury buff, which grants attack. And that should stack on top of the fact of if they are a hero champion as well. So you could get 2 Fury buff increases to your power upon landing a Special 3, which actually makes it one of the cases where it may be a good idea to seek to apply that if you are able to. Now, the last thing that we need to cover about Magneto has to do with his signature ability, Homo Superior. And this really just kind of helps prevent Magneto from losing excess amounts of health. This really just prevents Magneto from losing excess amounts of health when struck by a when struck by any heavy hitting attack, excluding special 3s, so there is a way to bypass that, which is different from what he was able to do previously, because previously he was just immune to taking more than that amount of damage from any source, including special 3 attacks. And that comes down to being about a sixth to an eighth of his health if you have the ability fully maxed out. Additionally, Magneto will gain additional critical resistance and block penetration when attacking into his opponents, and if the opponent is magnetized, then those bonuses are doubled. And finally, the heavy attacks will deal an additional burst of energy damage when they land on the opponents as well. So that's really what we needed to cover when it comes to talking about Magneto and how drastically his character has been altered. But what do you think? Do you think that Magneto has changed enough, or is there still more things that you would like to see changed or altered about this character? Be sure to let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. And again, if you've made it this far into the video, make sure that you drop that like. Thanks so much for your time, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.